This is the exit of the Persian Gulf, the world's busiest energy corridor, the Strait of Hormuz. At its narrowest point, it's only 48 kilometers wide, yet it carries the life or death speed of 1/5 of the world's oil. Every day, approximately 20 million barrels of crude oil flow through here to every corner of the world. In March 2026, this artery was severed. An earthquake affecting the global energy supply began. Panic spread from the geopolitical chessboard to every corner dependent on energy. Asia, the eye of the storm, 80% of the oil passing through Hormuz, 90% of the natural gas, is destined for Asia. Japan, a resource-poor island nation, relies on this strait for 90% of its crude oil. Even with over 200 days' worth of strategic reserves, it cannot escape the chain of price shocks. Turning to South Korea, the situation is equally dire. South Korea's natural gas reserves are only enough to last a few weeks. Once the supply is cut off, the heart of its industry will stop beating. India, in South Asia, faces a double whammy. More than half of India's LNG comes from the Gulf. Every cent increase in oil prices balloons its import bill by hundreds of millions. But for Pakistan and Bangladesh, the issue isn't price but power availability. They are almost entirely dependent on Qatari LNG. Shutting off the supply would cripple their power grids. As the world's largest crude oil importer, China relies on this route for nearly half of its imports. However, thanks to its vast strategic reserves, China has a stronger buffer. But at the cost of this, China has had to turn to the Atlantic, launching a fierce battle for LNG in the global spot market. Thailand in Southeast Asia is suffering from a different kind of pain, a current account deficit. Nomura Securities' model shows that for every 10% increase in oil prices, Thailand's current account deteriorates by 0.5%. Thailand has urgently suspended oil exports to protect its domestic reserves. Japanese refiners are urging the government to open the valves of its strategic reserves. Regardless of the size of reserves or national strength, an energy inflation sweeping across Asia has arrived. This is the first wave of the Hormuz blockade's impact. Asia, facing the storm head-on. Europe, collateral damage. Our focus shifts to Europe. This continent, just recovering from the energy crisis of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, is once again on edge. Although Europe only receives about 8% of Qatar's LNG, in a globalized market, no one can remain unaffected. Currently, European natural gas inventories have fallen to 39%, but the window for restocking has been closed. Goldman Sachs warns that if the blockade continues, European gas prices could surge by 130%. Under Europe's unique electricity pricing mechanism, soaring gas prices directly drive up electricity prices. The energy-intensive fertilizer and electrolytic aluminum industries will be the first to bear the brunt. From energy to industrial products, from industrial products to household bills, this will ultimately trigger widespread inflation. The memories of 2022 have not yet faded, and the challenges of 2026 are already upon us. Europe will directly compete with Asia for limited LNG resources, and prices will only go higher. Adi Mzirovich, Surrey Clean Energy. Attacks on Qatar's energy facilities have reduced global LNG supply by 20%, with shockwaves reaching European households. This is collateral damage. While there wasn't a direct supply disruption, prices tell you the damage is just as profound. Europe is learning that in a turbulent world, there is no true energy security. Act 4. Middle Eastern oil producers. Being eaten by their own resources. But in this crisis, it's not just consuming countries that are suffering. Kuwait, a major OPEC oil producer, has begun cutting production. The initial cut of 100,000 barrels will soon triple. The UAE is also managing production levels to cope with storage limits. Iraq has cut supplies by about 1.5 million barrels per day. The storage tanks are full, that's all. Qatar, a global LNG giant, was forced to shut down production. Drone attacks and security threats have forced energy facilities to become military targets. JP Chase warns that by the end of next week, Middle East production cuts could exceed 4 million barrels per day. Saudi Arabia and the UAE's bypass pipelines are operational, but their capacity is limited, far from meeting immediate needs. OPEC Plus has spare capacity, but ironically, it's locked within the Strait of Hormuz. The oil price shockwave. The horror of the numbers. Where will crude oil prices go? Let's look at some scenarios. Under a moderate shock, the world loses Iran, and oil prices surge towards $90. Goldman Sachs warns oil prices could break $100 next week if the conflict continues. If the blockade lasts more than a month, oil prices could rise to $120. If there is a complete shutdown, oil prices could surge to $150, severely damaging the global economy. This means that several percentage points of global economic growth will be wiped out. From the macro to the micro, the lives of every ordinary person will be rewritten. Natural gas. The real fatal flaw. In this crisis, natural gas is more vulnerable than oil. Qatar, a supplier of nearly 20% of the world's LNG, must export through here. Oil may have pipelines to bypass it, but Qatar has no land-based alternatives for its natural gas. Global LNG supply has instantly decreased by 20%, resulting not only in price increases but also in a physical shortage. Goldman Sachs analysis. If the disruption lasts for a month, Asian LNG spot prices could surge by 130%. Even Chinese buyers with long-term contracts will face the insane challenge of spot market premiums. A war with no winners. The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has reopened old wounds in the global fossil fuel system. It declares to the world, true energy security lies not in a single strait, but in diversified supply. As of today, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz continues to deteriorate. The world of energy will never be calm again.